First time here at this course, first round in. What were you seeing after your first round?
I mean, I would have liked to have been a little sharper today. I got to a good start, but I kind of struggled from then on. But just overall, hope to be a little sharper tomorrow.
Scottie, when you haven't played a course, do 2 or 3 days of practice get you to know it like you want to, or it's still going to take time?
I mean, I think it gives you enough information. I think a golf course like this, this golf course is...
To the interview room. Jon, welcome back to the Masters.
Thank you.
Jon has played in 6 Masters. He has 4 top 10 finishes. We'll begin the interview with questions in English and then leave time for Spanish. Jon, with those past experiences, what have you learned that you're applying to your preparations for this year?
I feel like it's very difficult to apply everything you learn from each round here.
3 years ago, Scottie, Scheffler, and Jon Rahm were fighting each other for the #1 ranking in the world. This week, one of them is at the PGA Championship at Aronimink, and the other is on a separate circuit that may not exist next year, still fighting a $3 million fines dispute that cost him his best chance to play in the Ryder Cup. This is not a story about LIV Golf versus the PGA Tour. That war is over, and the scoreboard is brutal. This is about what happens to the man who was Scheffler's only genuine rival for the best golfer in the world title, when that man makes a decision that takes him completely out of the conversation. Jon Rahm left the PGA Tour for LIV Golf in December 2023. In the 2.5 years since that decision, Scheffler has won 20 PGA Tour titles, 4 majors, and over $100 million in career earnings. Rahm has watched from a different tour, and Scheffler, the man who never raises his voice, has now said publicly, on the record, exactly what he thinks about the players who left. The quotes are pointed, the timing is devastating, and they were delivered with the quiet certainty of a man who knows he was right. Honestly, I think Scheffler's "go ask those guys" quote is the most controlled, most calculated takedown of a rival in professional golf in the last 10 years, and nobody in the mainstream press gave it the attention it deserved. Is Scheffler right that the players who left for LIV bear the responsibility for fixing the sports divide? Or is that too convenient a position for the man who benefited most from their departure? Drop it in the comments right now. And if you want the full inside story on what Rahm said back and what the numbers actually say about who made the right call, subscribe. Because this story is not just about money, it's about legacy. Let's set the exact timeline, because the gap between where these two men were and where they are now is the most important number in this entire story. May 2023, the PGA Championship at Oak Hill. Scheffler finishes runner-up to Brooks Koepka. He plays brilliantly, shoots a final round 65, but it's not enough. He does, however, pick up a consolation prize that matters. He replaces Jon Rahm at #1 in the world rankings. Rahm had held the top spot, Scheffler took it, and Scheffler has been there ever since. December 2023, Jon Rahm signs with LIV Golf. The deal is reported at between $300 and $600 million guaranteed. He leaves the PGA Tour, the DP World Tour, and the competitive ecosystem that had made him one of the 2 best players on the planet. January through December 2024, Scheffler wins 9 events worldwide. He is named PGA Tour Player of the Year for the 4th consecutive year, matching Tiger Woods. He wins the PGA Championship at Quail Hollow. Rahm, meanwhile, competes in 14 LIV events on a separate circuit, finishing the year with 0 major championship victories in a world ranking that has dropped significantly from its peak. March 2026, the DP World Tour offers a settlement deal to 8 LIV players. 8 accept. Rahm rejects it, calls the 6-event requirement extortion, and continues his appeal. His Ryder Cup eligibility becomes uncertain. McIlroy publicly calls it a shame. May 2026, the PGA Championship is held at Aronimink Golf Club. Scheffler is in the field. Rahm is in the field because LIV players received major championship exemptions. And the 2 men who were fighting for the world #1 ranking just 3 years ago are now in the same building, but in entirely different worlds. Scheffler is the world #1. Rahm is the world #6. 3 years ago, they were separated by less than a ranking point. Now the gap between them is the size of a career. And Scheffler, who has never publicly attacked a fellow player, who has always said he holds no ill will toward anyone who left, has now delivered a series of quotes about the LIV division that carry the weight of everything he has not said for 3 years.
Scottie Scheffler is a 4-time major champion. He is the 2025 PGA champion. He is the player who throughout the entire LIV war consistently refused to moralize publicly about the players who left. He said repeatedly that he held no bad blood toward the guys that left. He said everybody made their own decision. He was careful, he was measured, he was the model of competitive professionalism. And then, ahead of the Charles Schwab Challenge at Colonial earlier this year, a reporter asked him a direct question about the LIV divide, about when the game would come back together, about whose responsibility it was to fix the fracture. Scheffler looked at the reporter and said this: "I hold no ill will toward any of those guys that left. If we want to figure out why the game of golf is not back together, go ask those guys. Go to wherever they are playing this week and figure out when the game is going to come back together." 7 words. Go ask those guys. That is not the language of a man who is diplomatic. That is not the language of a man who is carefully managing relationships for future negotiations. That is the language of a man who has absorbed 3 years of watching his rivals leave, watched the tour restructure around their absence, watched himself dominate an era that was supposed to be theirs too, and finally said, without raising his voice, exactly what he thinks. And then he went further. You had some guys that left our tour and then sued our tour. That wasn't really in great taste. Then you had some other guys that just left and they wanted to do something different. Everybody made their own decision, and I have no bad blood toward the guys that left, but a path toward coming back, it wouldn't be a very popular decision, I think, if they just came back like nothing ever happened. Then the line that should have generated more coverage than anything Scheffler said all year. They did kind of leave and they left our tour. That's just part of it. There should be a pathway back for them, but they definitely shouldn't be able to come back without any sort of contribution to the tour. You stayed. You turned down the guaranteed money. You watched colleagues leave for hundreds of millions of dollars. You watched them file lawsuits against the organization you committed to. You watched their legal teams try to dismantle the tour structure that was protecting your career and your colleagues' careers. And then you won 9 events. You won 4 majors. You earned $100 million. You never said a bad word publicly. And now someone asks you whose responsibility it is to fix golf's divide, and you point down the road to wherever LIV is playing that week. That is not a diplomatic non-answer. That is the most devastating verdict one competitor can deliver on another, and it came from the calmest man in professional golf. Is Scheffler right that the LIV players bear the primary responsibility for reunifying professional golf, or is it equally the PGA Tour's fault for forcing the situation that drove them out in the first place? Drop it below. I read every single one.
Now, here is Jon Rahm's side, because this is not a simple morality play. At Aranimic this week, Rahm was asked directly about the period since his LIV switch. He was asked what he had learned. He was asked about his relationship to the criticism that has followed him from every corner of professional golf. And what he said was more self-aware and more honest than anything the narrative usually credits him with. It was really fun to be out there, in the landscape nowadays, in which, as players in LIV, we hear a lot of things from articles, from social media, from comments, Rahm said. I was never thinking that I was going to be any sort of weight that would tip the scales to make things come together. That was never an argument in my mind. He described his Sunday charge at the 2025 PGA Championship at Quail Hollow, where he tied Scheffler on the back 9 before falling apart on the closing holes, as the most fun he had had on a golf course in a long time. He said the adrenaline of genuine major championship contention reminded him of what he had been missing. That is a man who knows exactly what he gave up, and who is still processing it in real time. But here is the part nobody is talking about. 3 years ago, Scheffler and Rahm were separated by fractions in the world rankings. Rahm was the better iron player by most analytical measures. He had already won 2 majors. He had already won the Players' Championship. He was, in many credible analysts' assessments, the most complete ball striker on the planet. Scheffler had none of his majors at that point. And then Rahm left, and Scheffler, without the direct competition of the best players in the world week after week, entered an era of dominance that may never be fully untangled from the fact that his biggest rival removed himself from the field. Tiger Woods dominated an era that included Ernie Els, Vijay Singh, Phil Mickelson, and David Duval. He beat them head-to-head, week after week, in the same field, under the same conditions. There is no asterisk, there is no but. The record is clean. Scheffler's era will always carry a question mark that nobody in golf media is willing to say out loud. Would his dominance look the same if Rahm, DeChambeau, and Garcia had been in the same field every week? We will never know, because Rahm made a decision in December 2023 that took him off the board, and the player who replaced him at number 1 has been there ever since. Here is the question that nobody at the PGA Championship this week will ask on the record. Is Scheffler the greatest player of his generation, or the greatest player of a generation that chose to fragment at exactly the right moment for him? And does the answer change anything about the legacy he is building?
There is one player in this story who has been the most vocal critic of Rahm's decision, and whose position is more complicated than it first appears: Rory McIlroy. McIlroy was blunt. He said 6 events is not a heavy lift. He pointed out that Rahm's own LIV contract commits him to 14 events on a different circuit, making the DPWT's 6-event demand look comparatively modest. He called the deal really generous. He said there was a reason 8 of 9 LIV players accepted it. And McIlroy's logic is sound. He stayed on the PGA Tour. He turned down guaranteed LIV money. He played 20-plus events a year while Rahm played 14. His argument that 6 DPWT events is manageable is mathematically correct. But here is why even McIlroy's perfectly logical position cannot fully close the gap on what Rahm is actually saying. Rahm's argument was not about whether 6 events is physically possible. It was about whether the DP World Tour, an organization he had paid into for years, whose membership rules require 4 events, not 6, had the right to unilaterally increase that requirement as a condition of settling his fines. McIlroy says it's a reasonable ask. Rahm says it's extortion. Both have a point. And the fact that 8 players took the deal while 1 did not does not automatically mean the one was wrong. What it does mean is that Rahm is now the outlier, the holdout, the name attached to the last unresolved dispute between LIV and European golf. And McIlroy has spent months making sure everyone knows it. The resolution did come. Rahm eventually paid, accepted 5 events instead of 6, and secured his Adair Manor eligibility. But not before the damage was done. Not before McIlroy's "there are 2 guys who can prove it" quote became the defining soundbite of the feud. Not before Scheffler's "go ask those guys" quote made its way into the public record. Now that Rahm has paid his fines and is eligible for Adair Manor, do you think the McIlroy and Scheffler public pressure campaign was right to push him into it? Or did it permanently damage the locker room chemistry of the next Ryder Cup team? Drop it in the comments. Here is why the 2026 PGA Championship at Aronimink is the most loaded backdrop for this story. Rahm is in the field this week. He is competing as a LIV Golf player, eligible by virtue of his major championship status, not because of any reconciliation with the DPW Tour or the PGA Tour. He is there on past credentials, and he is there with Scheffler. They have not been regularly in the same field for 2.5 years. Their rankings rivalry, the one that defined professional golf in 2022 and 2023, is a historical artifact. The Washington Post ran a piece this week under the headline, "It was only 3 years ago that Jon Rahm and Scottie Scheffler were fighting to be #1 in golf." The framing is elegiac. It sounds like a eulogy for a rivalry that should have been one of the great ones. At Quail Hollow last year, Rahm mounted a Sunday charge and briefly tied Scheffler on the back 9, then fell apart on the closing holes. He described it as the most fun he had had in golf in years. That detail is devastating in its own way, that just being in contention at a major felt like something new, like something he had been missing. From January 2024 through May 2026, Scheffler won 11 events worldwide, including 4 majors. In that same period, Rahm won 0 major championships. Before LIV, Rahm had won 2 majors in less than 3 years. After LIV, he has won 0 in 2.5 years. 1 decision, 0 majors. That is the arithmetic of December 2023. And yet Rahm is at Aronimink this week, at a press conference talking about how it was really fun to be in contention at Quail Hollow, talking about hearing things from social media and articles, talking about not being a weight that would tip the scales. He knows. He has always known.
Step back from Scheffler and Rahm. Step back from the rankings and the fines and the Ryder Cup eligibility disputes, because what this rivalry and its fracturing actually tells us is something professional golf does not want to say out loud. Imagine you are one of the 20 best players in the world in December 2023. You watch the #2 player on the planet, your most formidable, most direct rival, accept a reported $300 to $600 million contract to play on a different circuit. You watch 9 other elite players follow over the next 12 months. You watch the competitive ecosystem that made your sport extraordinary. The week-to-week battles between the planet's best get replaced by segmented circuits that rarely intersect. And then you go on to have the most dominant run of your career. And someone asks you whether the LIV split hurt the sport, and you say, "Go ask those guys." You are not wrong. But the answer is incomplete, because the split did not only hurt the sport, the split also cleared the field for you. Scheffler's legacy is real, his wins are legitimate, his work ethic, his character, his composure under pressure, none of that can be questioned. The trophies exist, the records exist, but professional golf, the sport itself, lost something in December 2023 that it has not recovered. The rivalry between Scheffler and Rahm should have been the story of the next decade. 2 players at the absolute peak of their powers, separated by fractions, pushing each other to heights neither could reach alone. Instead, we got one side of it, the dominant side, the winning side, and the other side looked back from a different tour, talked about how fun it was to be in contention at Quail Hollow, and went back to playing 14 guaranteed events a year. Professional golf is not better for having fragmented. Scheffler is not less great because it did, but the era he is building his legacy in will always carry the weight of what didn't happen, and that weight belongs equally to the players who left, the tour that let them feel they had to, and the organization that now controls the broadcast rights through 2030. Has Jon Rahm's LIV decision ultimately hurt his legacy more than it helped his bank account? Or was $300 to $600 million the right call, no matter what? Drop your honest answer right now. Here is the moment that will define everything at Aronimik this week. Scheffler and Rahm are in the same field, the same leaderboard, the same major championship. For the first time in years, the numbers next to their names will be directly comparable, not separated by circuit affiliation or eligibility disputes, or fines appeals, just scores. Scheffler enters this week as the dominant player of his era. Rahm enters this week as the man who was supposed to share that era and instead watched it from a different building. Rahm shot 65 on the final day at Quail Hollow last year. He tied Scheffler briefly on the back nine. For 3 or 4 holes, it looked like the rivalry was back, like the December 2023 decision was just a detour, not a destination. Then, the Green Mile happened. Rahm fell apart. Scheffler went on to win. I think something different happens at Aronimik this week. I think Rahm is more motivated than he has been at any major in 2 years, and I think the most interesting leaderboard scenario this week involves both of them on it, on Sunday, under pressure, at the same major. If you want the inside story when that leaderboard takes shape on Sunday at Aronimik, subscribe, because the rivalry that was supposed to define professional golf never officially ended. It just went underground. And Shinnecock Hills and Adair Manor, and every major after this one is another chance for it to surface. This story is not over.